Allie with Potomac Beads, and today's tutorial is going to feature some Ava beads to make this fun Crystal Frost Pendant. The pendant is going to be showing you how to use multi-hold beads as well as add in some seed beads and bezel set around a 10mm Rivoli. Grab the materials listed in the front of the video and join me to make this fun, beautiful, frosty pendant.
We are going to begin with the center of our actual piece. We're going to be building the front of the piece, and then from the front of the piece we're going to flip over to the back of the piece. To do the front of the piece, when you're looking at it and working with it, we have about 4 feet of beading thread, which is 0.006 on a 12 needle. I'm going to start by basically making a round circle that is going to consist of Ava beads, which are going to go through the A, or the top portion of the A. Then we're going to add a RounDuo mini and then another Ava bead. This is going to be repeated until we get a quantity of 6 of each of our Ava beads as well as our RounDuo minis. So I'm going to just go right along here, picking up those beads and adding 6 in the quantity. And again, the color that you choose for this pendant is going to really dictate whether or not it looks like a flower or whether or not it looks like a snowflake. So color matters in this one. And I decided with that time of the year, for the published date of this, that a snowflake would be fun. I'm going to bring this whole design down towards the end of the thread. And the first thing that we are going to do is tie this into a loop. So again, I have on 6 of my RounDuo minis and then 6 of the Ava beads. We're going to tie a loop, 1 knot, and then another knot, making sure that your beads are not actually in the actual loop, that they're sitting to the outside. Go ahead and push your Ava beads towards the outside so you make sure that loop is not pulled too tightly. We want it to be a little bit flexible along in there. So we have in our 6 Ava beads as well as our 6 of our mini RounDuos. So the RounDuo minis are going to sit right in between there, and then we have those Ava beads on in the starting section of this design. Now that we have the thread here together, I have loosened it up just the tiniest bit so that way we make sure that all of our Ava beads sit nicely and out to the side. What we're going to do is we are going to build the top of the pendant when looking in, which is going to be our way to hold in our Rivoli. And you can use also, I have a cabochon here in the example piece, which is just one of the mood cabs as well. So it kind of is fun in the middle there, changes colors with that magic orchid. Going around them, we're going to be using this same RounDuo, and the RounDuo is going to have 2 holes. It has basically a hole that is going to go right next to and connect to the Ava beads, and then it has a hole that we're going to use to connect to the middle and go in and join beads there. So what we're going to want to do is go from the bottom hole where our knot is to the top hole, or the outer hole that's not being used currently, of the RounDuo mini. From there, we're going to add seed beads going from one RounDuo mini to the next around in a circle. And as we do that, I'm going to just make my thread end a little bit longer. We're going to be adding them in a series of 2 15s and 1 11. So I have my 2 15s in my galvanized gold, my Crystal Lab 11, and then 2 15-0 seed beads. Once you have these on your needle, go ahead and skip over the Ava bead and connect into the open hole of the next RounDuo mini. Pulling that tightly then, those beads are just going to kind of sit right on top of that Ava bead. Again, 2 15s, 1 11, 2 15s. And what we're doing is creating a netting that is going to hold that cabochon or that Rivoli in place. And because we have 6 RounDuo minis that we're connecting onto, you're going to do this same series of beads 6 times. Always again going through and making sure you're grabbing that open hole of the RounDuo mini. Keep in mind too, these are going to sit a little bit right on top of the Ava beads. You want them to all be to the same side of the Ava beads. So you want them all to be basically facing forward and in front of rather than behind the Avas, because if they end up behind the Avas, you're not going to be able to bring them to the middle as easily. So I have 4 on, and I have 2 more to go. I'm gonna get this series of beads on here. And as you are coming out then, here I have my 5th on. And as I add the 6th, I'm gonna be going back in to the original RounDuo bead that my thread was coming out of. As I come out of that bead, I'm also going to go through the first 2 15s as well as the 11 OC bead that we just put on in that rotation. Give a nice little tight pull, and then make sure your thread is loose enough that your Ava beads can kind of sit down and flatten out. From here, we're going to be adding 2 15-0s between each of and grabbing onto each of our 11s here. So I'm going to add 2 15s in the gold, and then after you add the 2 15s in the gold, you're going to sew through the next silver 11 going around in a circle. It's going to pull that netting in and pull those RounDuos in towards the middle as well with it. 2 15s on to the next 11. And you're doing this all in a completely circular function, in a circular way. Going in 2 15s, and then on to the next 11. And again, we're doing this 6 times since we have a series of 6. If you would want to change the count and the number in your snowflake, you could do that. It's just going to literally take a little bit of counting to figure out what size cabochon, what size Rivoli, what you want to put inside of the space. Going around then, I'm just continuing with those 2 beads at a time and picking up all of the 11 O's. As I go in to add the last of my 2 15s, I'm sewing back into that same first 11 O that my thread was coming out of. And I'm going to pull that nice and tightly. That's going to bring all of those seed beads towards the front to create that nice netting. What I want to do now to pull it in a little bit tighter is I'm going to go back through all of those beads one more time. Generally speaking, whenever I do a cabochon or a netting, wherever the top or the last row is going to be, that's where I like to go in and actually reinforce it, because there's nothing quite as sad as if you lose out your cabochon or your Rivoli from your netting or from your peyote stitch. So I'm going in here and just going back through all those 15s that I just added, as well as the 11 O's that the thread is going through. That again is going to help round out the design. And get that nice rounded look established. So now my bezel is created that has the beads kind of in between there, and I'll be able to put my crystal and drop it right in to the middle there. You can see that beautiful start of the snowflake. Now obviously it's going to fall out the back until we go in and we build the bezel around the back. So that's what we're going to do next, is take our thread from the front of the piece towards the back of the piece in order to do the bezel, which in this case it actually is somewhat a reversible pendant because you see a different look from the back. So to get from the front to the back of the design, we are going to go down through 2 of our 11 O seed beads, or I'm sorry, 15 O seed beads right after the 11. And then we're going to go through the RounDuo that sits right there after them, going through the first hole, or the hole that sits closest to where that Rivoli is going to be for the middle. We're going to pull that nice and tightly and not get our thread twisted while doing so. I'll pull that out for you. And then if you happen to get that tail mixed in, just kind of move that tail out of the way. Eventually what we'll do with the tail is actually tie our ending thread and finish those off there. From here, again, I'm coming out the hole that's closest to the middle of my frost pendant. What I want to do to get in more of the design here is I'm going to go to the second or the back hole of the RounDuo mini and go from the outer hole to the back hole. So a lot of times what I'm talking about is stepping down on a piece. This is going to be what's known as kind of stepping down. We're going from one hole to the other. It's going to expose a little bit of thread on the outside of the RounDuo, but because we're using whites and silvers and gold, you're really not going to see the thread at all. From there, we are going to go through the actual Ava bead and out towards the next RounDuo. From here along the back, we are going to be adding some 11 O's in place that are going to go around the Ava bead, kind of coming out and adding in 5 beads at a time, and then we'll go around just like we did before and kind of catch on to those beads. Prior to adding those 5 beads at a time, we're going to do a little intricate step that is needed to come back and do the front portion of the pendant. So you can see here that this 11O that sits above and a little bit behind that RounDuo mini, we catch on to that as we add in our crystals and decorate the sides of our Ava beads. To get ready to do that, I need to add a 15, an 11, and a 15 onto my needle. Remember, you're coming out of one of the Ava beads. You're going to skip over the RounDuo mini, sewing into the next Ava bead. So you're adding 3 beads basically between the Avas, and we're going into that same hole of the Avas, which is the one closest to the top of the A. We're going to add those 3 beads, and you can see them just ever so slightly right now along the front there. You'll see them more as we decorate the front. We need to get these in prior to, or it's easier to get them in prior to adding our 5 beads for our back, because these are going to sit in front of those 5 beads. So each leg here of the Ava, you want to make sure you're not getting kind of caught on, and you're just doing a series of 6 of these where you have the 15, 11, 15, and then sew through that same hole of the Ava bead that our thread already has gone through. Make sure you don't have any thread exposed as you're doing it, and that those 3 beads kind of sit right there on top of the RounDuo mini. So I have 4 on here. And this is a little bit heavier and a little bit larger, but honestly, people wear much bigger earrings, so you could even do this as an earring. If you didn't want it to be as heavy as an earring, you could switch from the larger crystals here, those Briollettes, to some bicones instead, and that would get a little bit of a different look as well. So coming around then, I have my last of my Ava beads that I've gone through with those 3 seed beads. Now we're literally going to repeat the same thing, going through the Ava beads again, but this time as we go through the Ava beads, we're going to create the netting that holds in our cabochon or our Rivoli along the back. That's going to be done in a series of 5 beads. So we're going to go in now, and coming out of the Ava bead, we're going to add 5 of our 11O seed beads. So we've been alternating. This time it's just 5 11Os. Through the next Ava bead in line, so we're just circling around again, and you want to make sure those 3 beads that we just added sit in front of these 5 beads. So kind of pull those 5 beads to the back and make sure those are sitting behind those 3. So I'm going to go around again. We're doing everything in a series of 6. 5 11s go on into the next Ava. We're still on that first hole of the Ava bead. And you can see here how it wants to go to the front of those 3 beads. Pull it to the back and pull tight. Again, 5 beads go on and around we go. Making sure as I pull that those 5 beads go closer towards the back and those 3 beads go to the front. So it's going to look a little funky right now because those beads don't really have a direction that they know where to go or where to sit. So they're just kind of sitting looped on the side. Going through then my Ava bead. Oh, this gives me an idea. You could do a smaller version with the Avas. The count would be a little bit different because of the difference in the degree to which the turn is. But you can make a smaller pair. You might have to do a video with that as a pair of earrings to go with your pendant. So I have 4 sets of my 5 on, or 5 sets of my 5 on right now, and I need 1 more grouping. And then just like we did when we went around the front, we added into our little netting that we created 2 15O seed beads. what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna go around and connect to that third bead, or the kind of off bead, the uneven bead that sits along this grouping of 5. So along the back here, we just went through and we added 5 11 O's the whole way along the back of the pendant. We're gonna go up through the first 3 11 O's that we added in that triangle and come out that top. Going around this circle then, we're gonna go ahead and grab on basically that third bead in every series of 5 that I added. In between each, I want you to add 1 of your 11 O seed beads, and then go over and connect to and pass through the next third bead. Again, add 1 11 O, count up 3 in that grouping of 5, and go through that third bead in this circular motion. In goes another, count up 3, and around we go. So you can see I'm not pulling super tightly because my Rivoli, or in the case of my example, my cabochon wasn't in place yet. So it's not there yet. So I don't want to pull super tight because I'm going to drop it into place and then I will pull tightly. Just like we did along the front where we reinforced to and went through that whole center, those 2 15s as well as the 11 that was already in place, we're going to do the same thing along the back here. So rounding out, I have my thread and needle through. I have all of my seed beads on with 1 11 O between each, and I'm going to drop my crystal down into that basically little crater that we made. Make sure that it sits correctly. Kind of force it down on its side, and it should sit in front of your Ava beads. So if you need to, you can kind of position it and move it a little bit, pulling those Ava beads to the top. What I'm going to do then is give a nice tight pull, and that locks that Rivoli right in place there. And you can see, like I said, it's kind of reversible, that this backing here has almost a scalloped. You can see a little bit better on the darker piece, has a little bit of that almost starfish look to it as well. So I'm going to go around here and reinforce that thread, that 1 seed bead that I added, as well as going through all of those center beads. So just what we did, the thread past that and the thread line that just occurred, I'm going to reinforce it, pulling all of these seed beads right back along the Ava beads to get that nice kind of starfish pattern. After we finish reinforcing that back section, what I'm going to do is come back to basically the Ava bead, and I want to come out right along the 11 O that was between the Avas through that first hole when we did 15, 11, 15. From there, I'm going to go up through, so I'm coming out after reinforcing that center loop. I'm going to go through 2 11s in one of my groupings of 5. And then remember, that was done through the Ava bead. So I'm going to go through the Ava bead right below it, and then out through the 15 and the 11, sitting right there along the top of the RounDuo. That way, that should not expose any extra thread because I'm going right along my thread passes that I already have. From here, we are going to connect and go to the top hole of our Ava beads. We're going to be adding in 4 seed beads that link to the top hole of the Ava, and then when we get to the top hole of the Ava, you're going to add a 15, a crystal, and a 15. So coming out of that 11 O, we're going to add 4 15s in the gold color, sew up through that first hole of the Ava bead through one of the legs there, and that creates our first little V section. Coming out the middle, go ahead and add one of your crystals with a 15 on each side. Go through the second leg of the Ava bead, and then coming out of the Ava, you're going to repeat the 4 15s, and after you add those to your size 12 needle, you're going to go down to that 11 O from, remember, that middle kind of grouping that we went through where we had the 11 with the 15s on either side, and we get those beads in there. Coming then, we're going to repeat this 5 times before we go in and actually create our bail or our bezel for our pendant to hang from. This would also look really great as a brooch or a pin as well, so you could do that too. And then you'd add a briolette drop to each of the beads. So if you wanted to, you could do that right along the side. From here, I'm going to add another 15, crystal 15, and then on to the other leg of the next Ava bead. I'm coming through the last of my Ava beads now, and what I'm going to do is use this opportunity to actually make my bail. Like I said, if you want to make it into a pin or a brooch or even a different style pendant, you can include another crystal briolette around the top. What I'm going to do is use my 15s and my 11s to create a bail in itself with some ladder stitch. So I'm going to add in 2 15s in the gold and then 2 15s in the silver. Let that drop next to your Ava bead here. I'll shorten up my thread. And then we're going to do some ladder stitch. I'm adding 2 more 11s, forcing those down into that Ava bead. And then I'm going to go back through those first 2 11-0 seed beads in a circle with the thread circling up. When I pull that tight, then those 2 beads that I just added will sit pretty much on top of the 2 original 11s. So back through again in a circle the 2 that you just added, and you just completed your first section of your ladder stitch. I'm going to do a series of these, adding 2, circling around through the 2 that you already have, and then continuing that circle by circling through the 2 new ones that you just added. Make sure between these steps to kind of give a nice tight pull so that ladder stitch stays nicely together. Keep adding till you have whatever desired length you want. If you want to do it on a chain and have a chain hanging down from it, then you know that you don't need, or have it hanging down from a train rather, you know that you don't need a huge bail. If you have a, say, herringbone rope, you may need a little bit of a bail. You could also add a wire guard or a wire protector and then add a jump ring or a closed loop to that if you wanted to do a different style bail. So you don't need to do this, but this is nice because it's all encompassing and you don't need any extra beads or any extra materials to build the bail in. So you can see I'm just doing a series of the ladder stitch. I have 6 pieces or 6 rows. I'm gonna do 7. And because this is a bail where there's going to be the most tension, I am going to reinforce this. So once I have the bail size, basically the size that I want it to be, that it's going to have the correct diameter to fit whatever I'm hanging it down from, I'm going to bring it back kind of upon itself. To do so, I'm ending with the same side that my thread started on, or that my ladder stitch started on. Going into that first original piece now, I'm going to sew into those first 2 beads towards the other side of the Ava bead. That's going to bring that bail or that pendant right towards the top there, kind of slow motion. And then I'm going to sew through the last row that I just did to round out that thread. That's going to create another piece. So basically I'm still doing the ladder stitch, but I'm not adding any beads. And that's going to finish off that pendant bail. From there, sew back through those original 2 beads. Coming out then, add 2 more 15s in the gold and through the Ava bead. Sitting that through then, that creates the bail that is going to hang out right along the top. And you can see a little bit better in that darker color here, how that sits right along the top. From here, coming out the last leg of the Ava bead, I'm going to add my 4 15s, which then link in to that 11-0 that I started going through. What I am going to do is reinforce and pull a little bit tighter the thread so that way my crystals stay more sticking out. Now obviously as you wear this, they're going to be a kind of against all along kind of the center or the outside edge of the pendant. So I'm coming out the 11-0, and this is just kind of one of those added steps you don't have to do. I'm going to go through those 15s that I added along the side, through the Ava bead, through the crystal, and the 15s, and then the whole way along the circle going through those beads. So going through the 15s, the crystals, the Avas, and then out the other side. And this guy here wants to go through too many beads at once and doesn't want to turn with the 12 needle. So I'm going to create a little bit of a wiggle with that, poke that needle out. From here then, I go through all the way down, tightening that up, pulling that tight through the 15, through the leg of the Ava, down the 15s, through the 11, up the 15s, through the Ava and the crystal, down, up, the whole way around the pendant. As I come through then and finish that up, I'm going to bring my thread that's attached to the needle right to the back so that it's ending near that starting thread. Tie those two threads off, and then you get a little connection point of thread right along the back, and take your thread zap or your thread burner and burn that down.
Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed making this Crystal Frost Pendant. Remember, depending on which color you do it in, you can do it in bolder colors to look kind of like flowers. You can do it in the nice frosted colors to look more like a snowflake as well. If you need any of the materials, again, you can go back to the beginning of the video where we listed them all off, as well as below the video near the like and subscribe button, which you can click if you want, is a list of the materials in the description. Hit the little show more, and that'll give you a link to all of these different materials that are used in the frost pendant. Also, you can keep in mind that in addition to, again, liking, you can also subscribe. Then you get regular updates from us at Potomac Beads to help inspire you and to make your creativity happen more easily. Again, stay connected with us in Facebook and Instagram, as well as checking out our PotomacBeads.com site, as well as PotomacBeads.eu for those of you joining us from abroad. As always, have fun creating, enjoy the wonderful community, and have a great time working with the Ava beads, making this fun, wintry Crystal Frost Pendant.